In this walkthrough, we're going to look at what it takes to take a Gatsby built website and host it in CloudFront. There are challenges to hosting in CloudFront because it doesn't look for index.html, and anytime you're in a subpage, those files aren't typically found by CloudFront unless you get in front of CloudFront and tell CloudFront how to find the files. And so this walkthrough is going to show how to do that. So there's a bunch of steps. One, we're going to create an S3 bucket to store the Gatsby output. We'll make sure we have a certificate for the domain that we're going to use. We're going to go set up CloudFront and get it working. Once it's working, we can show the differences between S3 correctly working and CloudFront not working. And then we can look at using Lambda, getting in front of CloudFront and adjusting some roles in the Lambda. And then after that, CloudFront will work. We'll be all set. So although it sounds like a lot of things, it's really straightforward to get Gatsby applications running perfectly in CloudFront as long as you get this Lambda at the edge stuff working. So here we go. So in S3, we'll create a new bucket. We're going to use the domain specifically for this example. I built a Gatsby app in TypeScript just for this example. We'll have it be birthed from the east, and we have to turn off the blocking of all public access. We'll agree to it and create the bucket. Now we have the bucket created. We jump into the bucket. We go to the properties. We go to static web hosting, and we tell it to use the bucket to host a website. And in here, we want to put the index.html as both the index document and, for now, the error document. You could always come back and adjust that later. Now that the bucket is set up, we need to take the output from the Gatsby build process that ends up in the public folder and push it up to the new S3 bucket. So we'll go to our terminal and we'll run a build. After the build's complete, we will transfer it up to S3. For transferring content to S3, I just like to use the AWS CLI and use the S3 sync mode. So we'll put in S3 sync, and we want an ACL, and we want the content that we're putting up to be readable by a regular generic consumer that's looking at your content. So, and we want to send up the public path, and we want it to go to S3 at our example site. And we want to use named profiles here, and I have one for this project. And this will place up the content from our build process up to S3. Now the content is in S3. We could technically go and look at it on S3, and we can do that here. We'll take the domain name out of the static website hosting location, and we'll be able to see it online. So we're able to click on home and the different pages, and the site is working for all intents and purposes. Also, you can reload the pages and they continue to work. You'll see when we move to CloudFront, it will not work when you reload. So now we have it working in S3. We have it hosting it correctly. Now we just need to create the CloudFront distribution and get that working. Before we do that, we need to make sure that we have a domain in our ACM. So if we go back to S3 and we go look at the ACM or the certificate manager, just make sure you have a certificate available for your CloudFront instance. And then we'll go over to CloudFront. So we'll create a distribution that's web-based, and our origin name, that's our bucket. So we're going to use the Gatsby example. We're going to redirect HTTP to HTTPS. We're going to put in our CNAMEs, we're going to put our domain name. And we're going to use our SSL certificate that we have. And then we'll go ahead and create our distribution. Now this takes a little bit of time to build, so we'll come back right when it's built, and then we'll talk about what we need to do next. While this is building, we can jump over to Route 53 and change our DNS. So we'll go into our domain, and we'll add a record for our example Gatsby site. And in this case, we're going to use an alias for CloudFront. So a record, alias, and then we'll go to CloudFront, and we'll select that. And that'll alias the domain name over to CloudFront. Now we can jump back to CloudFront. Now that the distribution is deployed, we can actually go look at it on CloudFront. So let's go ahead and open it up. And you'll see right away you get access denied. That's because that file doesn't exist. It's looking for essentially an empty file name. When CloudFront passes it to S3, it's not there and you get access denied. But if we ask for the index.html, it'll load perfectly and it'll actually work as well. So we could go in and add a behavior to always go to index.html on the root, but then if you reload the internal page, you'll get access denied as well. So we have some functionality in CloudFront that's not really working for us. Now there's a way around this. What we'll do is we'll create a Lambda function and we'll put it up on Lambdas on the edge, or Lambda at the edge, and we'll put that function in front of it. And then as the requests come in from the consumer, we can actually look at them and then mutate the request before we send it to S3, essentially putting smarts in front of the request and then sending it to S3 to get the correct file out. And so that's what we'll do next. So we'll pop over to Lambda and we'll create a function. We'll just call it origin mutation. And we'll create it. What we'll do is we'll scroll down and we'll go ahead and add the code for the mutator. And so what this handler is essentially doing is it's taking the URI that the consumer has given and it's looking to see if it's missing that index.html. And if it is, it mutates the request before it gets pumped over to S3. So that's essentially how it's working. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and save this. And now we have our Lambda function ready, and then place this function into the behavior. So up at the top, we're going to need this ARN. And you'll see what happens when we pop over to CloudFront. And we go in here and we look at the behavior. And we tell it, on the origin request, I want to run this. And then we'll go ahead and update it. Now here's where we get the first error. It says there's an invalid association and we have to update the IAM. There's just all this confusing language. And the first time it happens, it's incredibly confusing. And there's actually a better way to post this Lambda up to the edge, and you do it from the Lambda tab. So we'll go back to the tab. And the one thing we do need to know before we do that is we need to understand what the distribution number is. So this one starts in E2 and ends in 49. So we'll pop over to Lambda. And this is where the trick is at. You want to do actions deploy to edge. And when you do that, we're going to select the correct distribution. And we're going to acknowledge that we're ready to deploy it, and we'll deploy it. And then we get this error. It says your function's execution role is incorrect and it needs to be assumable by this location. So this is also confusing and there's very little docs on this, but here's how you solve for this. Inside your function, under the permissions, you go to the actual role. Under the role, there's a trust relationship, and you can edit the trust relationship, and you can add another service location. So now we'll add the edge of Lambda, we'll update the trust. Now the user's role is updated. We can go back to the Lambda screen. I'm refreshing it to pull down the latest info. We're going to go ahead and place it on the edge. We'll select the correct distribution. We'll acknowledge it and we'll deploy it. Now it's deployed. So we can go back to CloudFront and look at the distribution and we'll see it's in progress. When this is fully deployed, that means that Lambda function will be at the edge of all of the distribution and it will start mutating the requests. So when this is deployed and we come back, it should completely work inside of CloudFront. Okay, now that it's deployed, we can jump over to the URL that we had on CloudFront, and just by simply reloading it, we'll see that it functions. And now, all of the pages work, and you can reload. And that's how you get Gatsby output to work perfectly in CloudFront. All you need to do is create that Lambda to mutate the request before it's sent to S3.